You keep asking Allah to help you move on. But what if He's the one holding you still? What if this heartbreak isn't something to escape, but something you were meant to wake up inside? Because sometimes He doesn't let you heal yet, because you're still pretending you didn't break. In one, you lost yourself, not just them. It wasn't just a person you lost. You lost something no one talks about. The part of you that was holding everything together, while quietly falling apart. The version of you that kept forgiving what was never apologized for. The one who kept waiting for love to feel like safety, but only ever felt like survival. You didn't just lose a relationship. You lost the way you saw yourself. You lost the girl or the boy inside you who just wanted to be chosen without having to suffer for it. You kept giving more than you had, smiling when you felt unseen, answering messages that felt empty, holding conversations that felt cold, staying, because the idea of losing them felt scarier than losing yourself. And so you did. You lost yourself. You forgot what your own voice sounded like when it wasn't trying to stay soft for someone else. You forgot what peace felt like because you kept calling the anxiety in your chest love. You forgot what dignity looked like because you kept mistaking silence as strength. You forgot what presence was because you were always somewhere in your mind, overthinking every word, every pause, every little moment. They made you feel replaceable. And now, you don't know what exactly to grieve, because it's not just them. It's the echo of a version of you that kept trying so hard to feel worthy. You stood in front of someone who couldn't see you, and you kept asking yourself, what else can I do? What more can I give? Why am I never enough? But you were never the problem. You just made someone your mirror who could only reflect their own emptiness. And in doing that, you became empty too. That's why it still hurts. Not because you want them back, but because deep down, you don't remember who you were before they taught you to question your worth. So now you're stuck in a strange grief. You miss the comfort, the routine, the way your heart used to light up when they messaged you back. But you also know it was destroying you quietly. And the part of you that still hopes is also the part of you that still aches. And Allah knows. He knows you're not crying over them anymore. You're crying over who you had to become to keep them close. You're crying because you stayed when you knew you were being abandoned in pieces. You wanted it to work so badly. You wanted to be chosen. You just didn't realize you were choosing everyone else except you. And that's why Allah hasn't let you move on yet. Because this isn't just about heartbreak. It's about a full spiritual reset. It's about bringing you back to the version of you. He never abandoned even when you were abandoning yourself. He's holding you here, in this painful pause. Not to punish you, but to make sure you don't go back to the fire that convinced you it was warmth. He's showing you your worth by forcing you to sit with the emptiness you once tried to fill with their attention. Because you were never meant to beg for what Allah removes. You were meant to return to Him when your heart was finally too tired to keep breaking for someone else. And this is that return. This ache, this stillness, this confusion. It's not a setback, it's a reawakening. So if it still hurts, let it. If it still lingers, let it teach you. Because the version of you that's rising from this pain will never have to shrink again just to be loved. 2. The pain has a question. You've been asking Allah to take the pain away, to finally free your heart, to silence the memories that show up in your dreams, in your chest, in the quiet corners of your day, to let you move on like everyone else seems to. But here's something no one told you. Sometimes Allah doesn't remove the pain, because the pain itself is a question He needs you to answer. Not a punishment, not rejection, but a divine question wrapped in ache. Because pain doesn't always show up to break you. Sometimes it shows up to ask you what you've been avoiding for years. And here's the question your soul has been whispering beneath all your crying. Why did I call that love? You see, you're asking Allah to erase it, to help you forget, to help you stop feeling. But you never stop to ask yourself, what was I actually holding on to? Was it love or just familiarity? Was it connection or just escape from being alone with yourself? Was it real or just a dream you built to avoid your own emptiness? And Allah knows the truth, even if you don't. He knows you didn't love them. You loved the way they made your silence feel less loud. You loved the attention because deep down you didn't believe you deserved affection without pain. You loved the idea of them because the reality was always too fragile to hold without you constantly overcompensating. And now that it's over, you want Allah to remove the ache, but He's still waiting for the answer. Because you didn't just get hurt. You built your identity around something that was never meant to hold you. You made someone else your home, without realizing they never had the keys to your healing. And if Allah healed you right now without you understanding why it happened, you'd go back to the same story, the same patterns, the same hunger for love that feels just like survival. So He keeps the pain alive, not to torture you, but to speak. Because some of us don't listen when life is calm. We only listen when it hurts. And right now, Allah is speaking through what you call confusion. He's saying, I need you to ask better questions before I give you a better ending. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe this isn't about moving on. Maybe it's about finally going inward, to meet the you that's been buried under years of people-pleasing, emotional chasing, and spiritual exhaustion. You keep saying, Ya Allah, I just want peace. But peace doesn't come from erasing your feelings. It comes from understanding them, sitting with them, letting them ask their questions without running away. That's the path forward. That's the lesson He's been trying to teach. And until you stop begging for the pain to go away and start listening to what it's asking, you'll stay in this loop, confusing silence for healing. But once you answer the question, once you say, Ya Allah, I called that love, but it was only fear in disguise, everything will shift. The ache will soften, the shame will lift, and your heart will finally begin to breathe again. Not because you forgot them, but because you finally remembered you. 3. You're being undone. You keep telling yourself you're stuck. You wake up heavy. You go to sleep restless. Every step forward feels like walking through fog, and every memory drags you back like an anchor in your chest. You try to smile. You try to distract yourself. You tell people, I'm moving on, alhamdulillah. But you know deep down, something inside you is still not letting go. And the scariest part? You don't know who you are without the sadness anymore. You've carried it for so long it became part of your identity. It became the filter through which you saw everything, your worth, your future, your faith. But here's the truth no one else sees. You're not stuck. You're being undone. And that feels terrifying, because being undone doesn't feel like healing. It feels like breaking. It feels like falling out of yourself. It feels like everything you used to rely on emotionally, mentally, even spiritually is being peeled away. You're not reading Quran the same way. Your du'as feel different. You cry but don't even know what for anymore. You're not numb, but you're not alive either. And that's exactly where Allah is working. Because what you built before was a version of you that wasn't real. It was a survival self. A person molded by pain, validation-seeking, emotional suppression, and false strength. You built it to cope. You wore it to be loved. You kept it alive because you thought if you took it off, no one would stay. But Allah doesn't want that version of you anymore. So He's unmaking it, piece by piece, quietly, painfully, perfectly. He's undoing the self that prayed for love from people who couldn't even love themselves. He's undoing the you that kept apologizing for feeling too deeply. He's undoing the defenses you built around your heart that looked like independence, but were really just loneliness in disguise. That's why you feel exposed. That's why your emotions are raw. That's why you feel like you're unraveling from the inside out. Because you are. But that's not a breakdown. It's a beginning. Allah isn't tearing you down because you're weak. He's rebuilding you stronger, but first, He has to remove everything that was never part of your fitra. That false confidence, that relationship you worshipped, that self-image built on performance, not presence. You're not losing yourself. You're losing who you thought you had to be in order to feel loved. And when that undoing is complete, when Allah finally finishes peeling off the layers you picked up from hurt, heartbreak, and this dunya, what will remain is pure, still, unshakable, a heart that doesn't need chasing to feel worthy, a soul that doesn't seek love in desperation, a person who knows who they are in the eyes of their Lord, even when they feel invisible to the world. So no, you're not stuck. You're not broken. You're just being brought back to your original soul, the one that was never meant to be built on pain in the first place. Let it undo you, because only then can He rebuild you into someone this world was never prepared to meet. And closure would trap you again. You keep waiting for something to make it all make sense. Maybe a message, maybe a phone call, maybe just one conversation where they finally tell you why they pulled away so slowly, why they acted like you didn't matter, why they left without ever looking back, after you gave them every soft, sacred part of yourself. You keep thinking, if I just understood, maybe I could move on. But that's not healing. That's bargaining. Because the truth is, you don't want closure. You want comfort disguised as clarity. You want them to come back just long enough to say, you mattered. It wasn't your fault. I knew what you gave. And deep down, you want to hear those words. Because part of you still believes that if they just acknowledged your worth, then maybe the story would hurt less. But Allah knows what you don't say out loud. He knows that if you got that closure, you wouldn't walk away healed. You'd walk away reopened. Because that closure wouldn't bring you peace. It would reignite the same hope that already destroyed you once. You say you want it to end, but He knows. You'd give anything for it to begin again, even if it broke you twice as hard. And that's why Allah is silent. Not because He's ignoring your pain, but because He's guarding the parts of your heart you still keep handing to people who never knew what to do with them. If He gave you the answers right now, you'd keep spinning in the same story. One more text, one more call, one more excuse to hold on to something that never held you properly. So He closed it without your permission. He took the door and sealed it shut, not to punish you, but to protect you from your own softness, because He knows your heart. He knows how fast you forgive. He knows how quickly you'd try again, even if it meant losing yourself again. So, if you're wondering why you never got the closure, why you never heard the apology, why the chapter ended without a final page, it's because Allah loves you too much to let you write one more sentence in a story that was never meant to be your ending. Sometimes divine protection looks like unanswered messages. Sometimes healing begins the moment Allah doesn't let you go back, not even for goodbye. Because the truth is, you were never going to get the kind of closure your heart deserved. Not from someone who didn't even understand the weight of what you carried. And if Allah allowed them back, they'd only remind you of the pain they never tried to fix. And that would destroy the progress your soul has already started to build in secret. So instead, He closed it. Cleanly, quietly, with no final words. Because you don't need another ending. You need a resurrection. You don't need an explanation. You need a redefinition of who you are without needing their validation. And that only begins when you stop asking for closure from the same door He slammed shut for a reason you couldn't yet see. You don't need their words to heal. You need Allah's protection to stay. And that is exactly what you're sitting inside right now. 5. You used them to escape yourself. It wasn't just about them. It never was. You thought it was love. You thought they were sent to complete you. You thought their presence healed you, softened you, saved you. But the truth is, you didn't fall for them. You fell for what they made you forget. Because before they arrived, you were already lonely, already questioning your worth, already wrestling with silence that wouldn't leave you alone. And they entered your life like noise, beautiful noise, that drowned out the sound of your own ache. They made you feel seen when you hadn't looked at yourself in years. They gave you attention when you had stopped giving yourself compassion. They became the escape from the person in the mirror you didn't know how to love anymore. You weren't in love. You were in relief. Relieved to not sit alone with all the pain you never processed. Relieved to not hear the voice in your head asking, "When will I finally feel whole?" They became a shortcut, a distraction, a temporary fix. And that's why it hurt so much when they left. Because it wasn't just their absence. It was the return of everything you were trying to run from. The silence, the emptiness, the mirror, yourself. And now, that mirror is louder than ever. It's asking you questions you keep avoiding. Why did I need them to feel okay? What was I hiding inside them? Why was their love more believable than my own prayers? And this is where Allah's mercy begins. Because He didn't just remove them to protect you from heartbreak. He removed them to reintroduce you to yourself. The version of you that stopped growing the moment you started shrinking for love. The version of you that no longer knows what joy looks like without someone else confirming your value. He's bringing you back to that deep, private space you abandoned. The one where healing actually begins. The one where it's just you and Him and all the emotions you've been avoiding for years. Because you didn't just lose someone. You lost your favorite escape route. And now Allah is gently pulling you inward. Not to punish you, but to show you. You were never meant to outsource your peace to someone who didn't even know what peace was. They were loud enough to keep you distracted, but not deep enough to keep you grounded. And that's why it had to end. Because real healing isn't found in being seen by others. It's found in being honest with yourself. So this ache you're feeling, this hunger for them, this confusion, it's not heartbreak anymore. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from using people to numb what only Allah can heal. He's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to cleanse you. Of all the patterns, all the crutches, all the ways you kept hiding behind relationships, conversations, daydreams, because you were afraid of facing your soul raw. But now there's no one left to distract you. And that's the gift. Because when you finally stop running and you turn inward, you'll find a version of yourself you forgot existed. One that doesn't need to be seen to feel worthy. One that doesn't need to be desired to feel beautiful. One that doesn't need anyone else to fill the space where Allah always intended to live. So, no, you're not craving them anymore. You're craving your own return. And that is exactly what Allah is making space for. 6. You settled to be chosen. You didn't just love them. You made yourself small for them, quiet for them, patient for them. You bent in ways that cracked your soul, just to be chosen. But they didn't choose you. Not fully. Not the way you kept choosing them, in silence, in sacrifice, in sujood. You thought you were being loyal. You thought you were being strong. You told yourself, this is love, this is saber, this is what it means to fight for someone. But deep down, you knew. You knew you were shrinking. You knew you were adjusting yourself in ways that made you feel invisible. You knew that every time you kept the peace, you were losing your voice. You knew you weren't being seen. You were being used for your softness. And you tolerated it. Because being almost loved still felt better than being completely alone. So you stayed. Even when their presence made you feel lonelier than their absence. Even when your intuition was screaming, this is not where you're supposed to be. But the fear of being alone was louder than the pain of being misunderstood. So you kept showing up, giving more, apologizing for things that weren't your fault, convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, if you were softer, quieter, easier to love, they'd finally stay. But they didn't. And now that it's over, you're left with a deeper ache than heartbreak. You're left with the realization that you taught them how to treat you. You taught them that your love didn't come with boundaries. You taught them that you'd stay even when it hurt, even when it burned through your worth. And that's the hardest truth to carry. Not that they left, but that you settled. That somewhere along the way, you stopped asking, is this love? And started asking, what else can I do to be enough? But Allah saw what you couldn't. He saw that your heart was being stretched in ways it was never meant to bend. He saw that you were lowering yourself just to reach someone who was never willing to rise to meet you. He saw that you weren't being loved. You were being drained. And so he stepped in. He ended it. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you had forgotten how good you truly are. Sometimes Allah breaks what we're begging Him to bless, because He knows we're building our worth on something that's quietly killing us. And the pain you feel now is the detox. You're grieving not just what you lost. You're grieving who you became to be chosen. But here's what no one tells you. You didn't lose love. You lost a test that revealed how quickly you'd abandon your own soul just to feel wanted. And now Allah is bringing you back. Not to the relationship, but to the boundaries you abandoned, to the dignity you silenced, to the power you gave away piece by piece. Every time you said, it's okay, I'll stay, I'll wait, I'll give more. He's showing you that love doesn't require self-erasure. That being chosen means nothing if you had to kill parts of yourself to earn it. So, no, you're not weak for missing them. But you are being called to wake up now, because you were never created to settle. You were never written to be background noise in someone else's story. You were meant to be loved fully, not conditionally. And the first soul who must give you that love is you. And until you reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away, Allah will hold you in this place. Not because He's delaying your future, but because He's restoring your worth. And this time when love comes, you won't shrink for it. It will rise to meet the version of you that finally knows. Being chosen means nothing. If you had to betray yourself to be picked, 7, you still haven't forgiven you. You say you've moved on. You've blocked them, deleted the pictures, told your friends, it is what it is. But there's something still stuck inside you, something heavier than heartbreak, something more suffocating than grief. It's the guilt, the shame, the way you keep punishing yourself, silently, softly, every single day. No one sees it. You smile, you pray, you're functional, but somewhere in the corners of your heart, You're still whispering things to yourself that Allah never wrote for you. I should have known better. Why didn't I walk away sooner? It was my fault. I stayed. Maybe if I was stronger, they would have respected me. And that voice, that quiet, cruel voice you don't even realize, is on repeat. It's not theirs. It's yours. That's why you're not healing. Because you forgave them. You made peace with their absence. But you never forgave you. You never forgave yourself for loving so blindly, for giving so deeply, for losing your balance, for trading your peace for a presence that only drained you in return. And now, every time you remember how soft you were, you don't just cry. You feel ashamed. You're angry at yourself for not walking away. You're disgusted by how much you begged, how long you waited, how much you compromised. You keep saying, "How could I let that happen?" But here's the truth Allah needs you to hear. You weren't weak. You were wounded. You weren't foolish. You were faithful. You weren't desperate. You were doing the best you could, with a heart that just wanted to be safe. Stop blaming the version of you that was just trying to survive. That version didn't need punishment. She needed protection. He needed comfort. They needed love. But they didn't get it. And now, instead of holding that version of you with mercy, you're abandoning them all over again. With shame, with guilt, with quiet self-hatred dressed up as lessons. But Allah doesn't treat you like that. Allah never said, "You were too much." He said, "I was always enough for you." Allah never said, "You should have seen it coming." He said, "Even when you didn't, I was already preparing your healing." Allah doesn't hold your past against you the way you do. He already forgave what you keep replaying in your mind. He already cleaned the chapters you still read with regret. So if you're wondering why the wound won't close, why the peace won't settle in, why even your du'as feel like echoes instead of answers, maybe it's because you're still fighting a version of you that just wanted to be loved. And instead of embracing that soul with softness, you're suffocating them with shame. But healing only begins when you stop blaming yourself for loving with a heart that was only ever trying to please Allah. Yes, you stayed too long. Yes, you gave too much. But you did it from a place of sincerity. You weren't chasing love. You were chasing connection. And that's not a sin. That's human. And now, it's time to stop punishing yourself. Because Allah never asked you to carry this pain forever. He never asked you to keep reliving what He already rescued you from. You deserve to look at your past self and say, "You didn't know better, but you loved with your whole heart, and I forgive you for that." Because until you forgive yourself, you will never believe that you're worthy of a love that doesn't make you suffer for existing. And Allah, He's waiting to show you that love. But first, you have to let go of the punishment you've been quietly giving yourself. Because your healing isn't blocked by who left. It's being delayed by the forgiveness you still refuse to give to the one person you never stopped abandoning. You. 8. This isolation is intentional. You keep asking why you feel so alone, why everything has gone quiet, why people are drifting, why even your own heart feels distant from itself, why the things that used to comfort you now feel heavy, why every door you knock on love, connection, belonging doesn't open anymore. It's like Allah unplugged you from the world and didn't explain why. And you've been trying to stay strong. You've been telling yourself, it's just a phase. Maybe I need time alone. But some nights, you look around and realize there's nothing left to distract you, no one left to run to, and you feel more abandoned than healed. But what if I told you, you're not abandoned, you're protected, because this stillness You're sitting in this strange isolation that no one else understands. It isn't a delay. It isn't a punishment. It's a divine sanctuary. Allah didn't leave you behind. He pulled you away. Away from the noise. Away from the people who drained you. Away from the versions of yourself that you kept performing just to feel accepted. Because if He didn't take you away, you would have never stopped performing. You would have kept showing up for others, while quietly disappearing inside yourself. So He made you invisible, on purpose, to protect the parts of you that were too sacred to be shared with people who didn't even know how to handle your softness. This isolation, it's a sacred rebuild, because Allah only hides what He values. And right now He's rebuilding you in silence, so when you rise again, it won't be as someone who needs to be loved to feel worthy. You'll rise as someone who knows they were worthy even when no one was watching. Sometimes He isolates you to show you that His love was always louder than their absence, that your worth never depended on who stayed, that you were never forgotten. You were just being preserved. And you might not see it now, but years from today, when you look back on this chapter, you will understand. You'll realize that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was where the real you was born. Not the one who begged, not the one who waited, not the one who kept lowering themselves just to be included, but the one Allah wrote in your soul long before heartbreak taught you how to shrink. Right now, the world doesn't see you, but that's the point. They're not supposed to, because if they saw you in this unfinished form, they would label what Allah is still working on. They would interfere with a healing that isn't ready to be explained yet. So He kept them out. He closed the door. He made sure no one could reach you until you finally reached yourself. Because in this isolation, you're not losing anything. You're regaining everything. Your voice, your clarity, your boundaries, your truth, your strength, your softness, your sincerity. You're being reintroduced to the version of you that doesn't beg to be seen, because they're already seen by the one who matters most. So don't curse this silence. Don't rush this phase. Don't mistake hiddenness for failure. Because while the world thinks you're gone, Allah is rewriting your name in places no one can erase. This is not the end of your story. This is the part where He builds the beginning you were always meant to live. Quietly, sacredly, and without interference. You haven't been left behind. You've been set apart. Not because you're weak, not because you're being punished, but because what Allah is building in you cannot be rushed, cannot be witnessed, cannot be interrupted. He took you away from the world, so the world wouldn't interfere with what He's reviving inside your soul. They don't see it. They think you're quiet. They think you're distant. They think you're stuck. But Allah knows you're not stuck. You're becoming. And when He finally lifts the veil, you won't be who you were when they left. You'll be someone they never expected to rise. Because this silence isn't the end of your story. It's the sacred part, where Allah is rewriting you in private. So no one else can claim the credit for your healing. Let them forget you. Let them move on. Because when you finally rise, it won't be for closure. It will be for arrival.